Okay, in this lecture, we're going to work on an interesting problem. Summarizing text. You have seen on a lot of blogs, on the homepage, there is a list of blog posts. And below each post, there is a summary. And at the end of the summary, you see ... How do we do that? So let's start by declaring a variable. This is going to be a really long text. And we want to summarize it. The first thing we want to do here is to check if the length of this sentence is below a given threshold. If that's the case, we simply display it. Otherwise, we need to summarize it. So, if sentence.length is less than 20, just an arbitrary number, we simply display it. Otherwise, we need to summarize the text. Now, the first thing I want to improve in this code is to get rid of this 20 as a magic number. I would like to express it using a constant. So constant integer maximum length. This way we don't have to spread that 20 all over the code as a magic number. And the code is more expressive now. Alright, now how do we summarize this? The poor way of doing that is to use the substring method like this. So starting from index 0 and taking maximum length. What is the problem with this? The problem is you may cut off a word as a result of that kind of substringing. And that's not a good thing. We want the summary to look clean. So we want to take into account the word boundaries. So the algorithm we're going to work on here is to count the number of words that roughly fits around 20 characters. How do we do that? The first thing we want to do is to break this sentence into words. So we use the split method and we use the white space as a separator. Now we are going to have a string array of words. Note that words is a string array. Now we can iterate over this array. For each word, we count the length of that word, add them all together. If we roughly get around 20 or exceed 20, that's a boundary where we need to cut off. So I'm going to declare a variable here called total characters, set it to 0. Now we're going to loop over the words. So a simple for each block. For each word, we need to get its length and we need to add it to total characters. So total characters plus equals word.length. And we also need to add 1 because of the space after that word. Now, if total characters exceeds 20, that's the time to get out of the loop. So immediately break. Now, one more thing we need here is a list to dynamically store all these words that are going to be part of the summary. So summary words is going to be a list of string. You learn about lists in the section about arrays and lists. So a list is a data structure similar to array where we can store a number of objects of similar type, but the size is dynamic. So now in the loop, we need to add the current word to our list. Then we do our checking to see if the total number of characters exceeds max length, then we break. So once we get out of this for each loop, our summary words list has all the words that need to go in the summary. What we need to do is to create a string and join all these words using a white space. How do we do that? The string class has a method called join. The first argument is a separator, so we use a white space. And we can pass our summary words list here. Now this join method returns our summary string. All we need to do is to append ... at the end, and that's going to be summary. Let's display it on the console. and run the application. Note that we didn't cut off a word. Now, in a real-world application, it would be nice to extract all this logic here into a separate method or a separate function, so we can reuse in different places. So what I'm going to do now is create a new method here. So this is the end of our main method. We can create another method here. And that method has to be static because our main method is static. So in order for us to call that method from the main method, we need to declare it as static. So static. The return type of that method should be a string. Let's call it SummarizingText. That takes a parameter of type string. Call it text, like that. And I'm going to move all this logic here. The only problem is we used the word sentence before, now we use text. So we can replace text. So we need to replace it. With ReSharper, it's pretty easy. Alt and Enter, change all sentence to text. If you don't have ReSharper, you need to manually go through each of these and modify them. Now at the end, instead of displaying it on the console, we need to return it. So return summary. And also we need to modify this one here. So if the text is short enough, we don't need to summarize it. We just return it. Now ReSharper is telling me that we don't need this else block here, the else keyword, because it's grayed out. Because if the text is more than max length, obviously the rest of this method is going to execute. So we don't need to explicitly use else here. So we can clean up the code like that. I select all of that, Shift and Tab to format it. We can make this code even cleaner because it's obvious that this method is returning a summary text, so we don't need to store this result in a variable and return it. We can simply put this expression here. Another thing we can do here is to have a second parameter here that specifies max length. So instead of hard coding the number 20, we give this option to the caller of this method to specify the max length. This way we increase reusability. So int max length, and we can give it a default value of 20 in case the caller of this method does not want to set the max length. And we get rid of this constant integer. And finally, back to our main method, we can create another variable called summary, call our SummarizingText method, and pass that long sentence here, then display it on the console. Let's run the application. We got the same result. Now, we can go and change the max length here. So let's say max length is going to be 25. Let's see what happens. So we got one more word in the summary. Again, we are not cutting off text in the middle of a word. Now we have a clean, reusable method that we can use in different places. And one last thing I would like to do here to improve the reusability of this method is, instead of declaring that inside this program, I want to put it in a class that I can use in different programs. Because in the real-world applications, we're not going to write all of our code inside the program class. We're going to have different classes for different reasons. So let's add a new class to this project. Add class. Let's call it string utility. And now we go back to program here. We select this method. If you're using ReSharper, you use Ctrl-W to quickly select a block of text like this. It's much faster than holding down the shift and using the down arrow like that. So Ctrl-W, and you can extend your selection like that. Or Ctrl-Shift-W, you can reduce the selection. cut. Now with Control and Tab, we switch window. And here, drop it. And finally, we need to make this class public. As I explained in the beginning of this course, we're going to just work with public classes and public methods in this course. Public is an access modifier, and I'm going to explain access modifiers in more detail in the second part of this course called C# Intermediate. And of course, we need to make this method public as well. Otherwise, it's not going to be accessible. Let me show you. So if you go back to program, and now we need to change the summarize text to string utility dot. See, there is nothing there because we didn't declare the method as public. So Control Tab, back here, add the public here, back to the program. Now if we put dot here, we see that utility method. All right, that brings us to the end of this lecture. I hope you enjoyed it and thank you for watching.